Well, thank you, Whitney, and good morning, everybody. How many know it feels good to be sporting Mariners apparel? You ask me, how many Mariner shirts do I have in my closet? One. We have not been relevant for decades. I got no clothing from the Mariners, but I got this one. In fact, my mom, she bought me this shirt because it is a Cal Raleigh shirt, and my mom's name is Raleigh. So she got me prophetically prepared for the season at hand. So it's exciting. Last night, Cal Raleigh, he was 3 for 4, but I heard the announcer, and again, I'm a poser. I am not a Seattle Mariner. I've seen one game last night. So I'm a little bit of a poser. But how many of you, like when your team's good, you're in? Like when they're irrelevant, you're like, what have you done for me lately? And they haven't done anything for us since King Griffey Jr. So anyway, but I'm in, and they said last night, they were down 8-1. It was just in this 3-game series. And the announcer said that no team, two teams since 1903, since the inception of baseball, the professional league, 2 teams have come back from a 7-point deficit in a playoff. One team was like, I think, the Red Sox in 2008. The other team, you had to hearken all the way back to 1929 to find a team. But our Mariners did it last night. So I have one announcement I want to share for you, and it's actually not so much for you as it is for you online. To our online community, we are so thankful that week after week, you join us. Some of you are live streaming right now. Others of you will be watching this in replay. But we want you to know that we have created a special event just for you. It's called Online Community Connect. And what we want to do on October 23rd, after these people get out of the building, Pastor David, our Connection pastor, and myself, we are going to jump onto a Zoom call. The link will be on the YouTube, and we'll send it out. But we're going to jump on a Zoom call because we just want to interface with you. We want to kind of hear your story, and we have some strategic questions that we want to ask you that we think will help us as a church family better serve you into the future. So please save the date. It'll be both after our 9 a.m. and our 10:45 a.m., and we will share life together. Everybody on the floor good with that? All right. Okay, well, good. Well, welcome to part 2 of our message series called Pre-Decide. Over the next several weeks, we are talking all about decision making. The big idea for this series is this concept. We believe that the quality of your decisions will determine the quality of your future. The decisions that you make this week, this month, this year, especially the big ones, those decisions today will determine the direction and the quality of your life into the future. So I want to illustrate our message this morning with the help of a few volunteers. So I'm going to invite to the stage my son Ben, Jeremy Slifka, Bob Gibson if you're here, and Jim Archibald. Come on up, and as they do, why don't you just give them a round of applause for... I said, you don't got to say anything. You just need to stand there and look good. So, all right, so I want to illustrate it this way. So this is one of Heather and I's sons. This is Ben. He is 14. He turns 15 on Thursday, and that's right. And Ben, he's an incredible young man. How many of you know he's not perfect? But we're very proud of who he is. He knows that. And who he is becoming. In fact, he's highly disciplined. This morning, he's doing cross country right now. He made a decision the last day that you could turn out, but he's all in when he's in. And so this morning, on his day off, he ran 10 miles this morning at 6 a.m. And that's right. So he gets that from his mom, and it's a good thing. So here's what this illustration is going to illustrate. This has been in future iterations. Okay, this has been at 14, but apparently at 34, he's going to do a little bit of lifting in the gym. We're going to grow a little bit. We're going to keep those good looks. This has been at 52. It was a stressful season of raising those kids. But they out of the house, and I'm growing it back. Because at 81, I'm looking good. Now, the good news is that you keep growing, so that's good. Okay. The quality of your decisions will determine the quality of your life in the future. And here's what I know. This guy at 34 is counting on this guy at 14 to make some important decisions with his life. He doesn't know it yet, but he's going to get here. And then he's going to get there, and then he's going to go there. And he doesn't know it yet. He just feels like he's living in the moment. But he will become somebody, and this somebody is counting on this somebody. So it's crazy how we develop. When we're younger, we're 12. Let's go down the timeline and shorten up a little bit. There you go. And talk really high. And hi, Heather, is this you? No, this has been, anyway, but when we're 12, there was no way he thought he would ever get involved in something like vaping. Like smoking marijuana. Seriously, Dad, come on. Why are we even talking about this? Seriously? But how many know when you're 14, the game changes a little bit? And things that you never thought would tempt you begin to tempt you. So all of a sudden, you're at a friend's house, and these aren't druggies. They're not drug lords. I think they call them plugs today. How many parents are just trying to stay up with the terminology of you're driving a whip, and it's, anyway, but do you still use that word? No, is that come and gone? All right, so that's rad. Anyway, so what are we talking about? Well, we're talking about drugs. So at 15, temptations just come in different ways. And so you're at a party, and these aren't bad kids. I mean, these are good kids. These are our kids. These are the kids of the community. They're not failing out of every class. They're not wearing goth clothes. They're not on every street corner trying to sell something. They're just living their lives, but the temptations are real. And whenever anything gets legalized, it tends to get normalized. And small steps turn into medium-sized steps. And medium-sized steps for some people turn into gigantic steps in the wrong direction. So you're at this party, and all of a sudden, these friends who are good friends, they say, hey, why don't you smoke this? It's pretty fun. I've done it. And all of a sudden, he's facing a decision that he hadn't thought about. But this guy all along is saying, would you think very carefully about the decisions you make, because they're going to determine who I am when you get here. But the decisions and the challenges and the temptations, they don't stop here. It's not just like your teenage years are the only rough sledding. Because when you get to 34, you're married, and all of a sudden you have 3 kids. And all of a sudden you're running and you're gunning and you're trying to grow in your career, and it's important. You're trying to climb this ladder. And you find out at your job that if you're willing to work more, if you're willing to sacrifice more, if you're willing to be away from home, you will make more. And when you make more, you will have more. And all of a sudden there's a pressure to make more so that we can have more. But all of a sudden those 3 kids and those wife, they're not seeing you as much. And now there becomes a temptation. It's a new one. Do I choose my work, or do I choose my family? Where do I give my time? Where do I give my priorities to? This guy is counting on this guy getting the marriage question right. This guy knows that the years to parent these 3 young kids at home only last so long. And so this guy is praying for this guy that he'll make decisions that will impact who he becomes in the future. But at 52, it's not like there's no temptations. In fact, did you know this? The second highest rate of divorce is right here at this life stage. Oh, it's tough right around here when we're just trying to figure out, who are you? You are female, and you are so different than I am, and you are male, and you're an idiot, and it's tough. But the second highest rate of divorce is right here. Because what's happens is these little ones, they're no longer here, and all of a sudden we look at our spouse and we're like, who are you again? And what do we have? Oh, I know we had something when we had them. We were so focused on them and helping them get through, but now it's just us. So all of a sudden this 52-year-old's at work, and his marriage, he finds himself in a little bit of a vulnerable season. In fact, unlike most seasons of a couple decades of his marriage, but in this season, he's just weaker than he's been, and things are a little bit more difficult at home than they have been. And all of a sudden, Tina, in the cubicle next to him, hey, you looking good. What gym are you working out at? And all of a sudden, Tina starts to put a bit of an emotional, flirtatious press. But here's what I know. This guy is counting on this guy that he'll win in that moment, that he won't fold in that moment, that he will honor the vows that he has made, because this guy plans on being married for 60 years. And this guy is praying his guts out that this guy won't blow it in a moment of weakness. So here's what we know. We know that the quality of our decisions today will determine who we are, the direction of, and the person that we become in all the days in front of us. Would you give these guys a round of applause as they have a seat this morning? Well, thanks for coming today, and you're dismissed. No. Well, welcome to part 2 of our series, Pre-Decide. What we're trying to do over 6 weeks is we're trying to have a conversation about the power of those decisions. We're trying to wake us up, shake us up, get us back in alignment to the people that God wants us to be, and the people, hopefully, that we are striving to become ourselves. We're talking about the power of decisions. As followers of Jesus, or if you're seeking what that life might look like in following him, here's what we know. We know that the decisions we make are incredibly important. They don't always feel like it in the moment, especially the ones that are a little bit in the gray or a little bit in the shade or a little bit in the dark. They don't always feel so significant, but man, can they set us off into a trajectory, and sometimes a negative trajectory. We find ourselves at a place or a person that we just didn't think we would ever be or become. As far as Jesus, our decisions are really important because the quality of those decisions will impact the quality of our life down the road. The problem is, how many of you have noticed we're not always good decision makers? Have you ever told yourself something like, I'm only gonna eat 10 chips? Just to instead replace that with, you ate chips for 10 minutes. How many of you, like, honey, I'm going into Costco just for two things, I promise, no impulse buying here. And you come out with 2 carts. Your spouse is like, what happened in there? It's a sale, honey. How many of you have told yourself that you would only spend 15 minutes on Insta, on Snap, on social, on Facebook, just to find out that 15 minutes turned into an hour and a half? And that's become a pattern in your life. How many of you have told yourself that you're only gonna have one drink to turn into far more than one drink? See, we know that our decisions are important, but sometimes all of us, myself included, we're not good decision makers. So what we're gonna do in this series, it's kind of the big thought for it, instead of waiting for a moment in the future to make a decision, especially when we're tired, when we're angry, when we're frustrated, when we're in a moment of passion, instead of waiting into the future to make a decision, we're gonna do something different. We're gonna pre-decide. We're gonna grab a hold of values, hopefully the values of God's kingdom. We're gonna say, infuse our hearts with those, and then from those values, help us make decisions. Help us to pre-decide now, so the moment in the future, we know who we are and what decisions we'll make. We have a little statement in this series that goes like this. When faced with hypothetical situation, I have pre-decided that this will be my determinative action. So when I am, as a teenager or as an adult, faced with sexual temptation, here's what I know. I'm not waiting until 11 p.m. when my girlfriend or my boyfriend and I are sitting on the couch together in his or her house with their parents gone on a vacation in Tahiti. I'm not waiting until that moment of passion hits me before I decide, who am I? What do I think about my sexuality? What are the boundaries that I'm living my life by? I'm not waiting for that. I'm pre-deciding right here, right now. When faced with an opportunity to make more money, but to do it in an unethical way, I'm not waiting until I get into this high pressure moment where the money is there if I will just do something that's a bit unethical. No, I'm not waiting for that moment. I'm pre-deciding right now. I would rather make less money to have more integrity. I'm pre-deciding. When faced with the decision in the future to talk behind or gossip about somebody else because emotionally they have hurt me, I'm pre-deciding today that if I haven't spoken to them, then I'm not gonna speak to anybody else. And that's gonna be the pattern of my life. What are we doing? We're pre-deciding because the quality of our decisions determines the quality of our life. So in this series, Pre-Decide, we're attempting to pre-decide to honor God in 6 different areas of our life. What are they? Week 1, we dealt with, we wanna be consistent. We're consistent. Today, we're gonna talk about I am ready. Next week, we're gonna talk about I am faithful. In part 4, we're gonna look at I am generous. In part 5, we're gonna talk about I am devoted. And then we're gonna finish with part 6 with being finishers. We're gonna talk about I am a finisher. So let's dive into today's content. Are you ready for it? Yes. If you're ready, say I'm ready. Yes. Thank you. Okay, we are gonna talk about being ready. I am ready. Let me ask you a question. How many of you have ever given into a temptation that you regret? You have done something, said something, not done something that you regret. Yeah, me too. All of us in this room without exception. So the question is, why did you do something that you regretted? Why did you fall to that temptation? And there's multiple answers for that, but what I would say is, it is likely that you were unprepared for that moment, that you had not crystallized the values in which you will live your life, and you were unready. You were not on guard in that moment when temptation came your way. When you read the Bible, one of the things that you find out, especially in the New Testament, is there's this press, God encouraging us to be ready, to be prepared, to be on guard. Because how many know we're not living in heaven yet? And how many know we got a nature, but that nature is conflicted from time to time? How many know there is a culture and a world that would love for us to embrace its values and forsake the values of God's kingdom, right? So in 1 Corinthians chapter 16, on this preparedness idea, the Apostle Paul, he wrote, be on your guard, stand firm in the faith. You're gonna need to be courageous, be strong. What did he say? He said, be ready. Before the moment of temptation comes calling your name, before the opportunity to step into compromise whispers your name, what are we gonna do? We're gonna be ready. We're gonna pre-decide. Jesus said something very similar in Matthew chapter 26, verse 41. Jesus said to his followers, he said, watch and pray that you will not fall into temptation. He said, the spirit is willing, but the flesh sometimes is weak. Jesus said, you need to be prayed up. You need to be on your guard. You need to be watching what's going on in your life. You need to be ready. Why do we need to be on guard? Why do we need to be prayed up? Why do we need to be ready? Well, let me give you 2 reasons in introduction here. And I think you might have a notes page by you if you want to grab that. 2 reasons why we need to be ready. Number 1, first reason is the devil doesn't take days off. The devil doesn't take days off. I don't understand everything about spiritual forces of evil and how that kingdom comes against our personal lives, but here's what I know. Jesus spoke about it often. Jesus talked about an enemy of our souls. He said that there was an enemy of God who was an enemy of our souls that would love to steal, kill, and destroy everything that matters to the heart of God. And let me just tell you, you here today, in all of your brilliance or in all of your dysfunction, you here today, you matter to the heart of God. You are significant to God. And if the devil could do anything and demonic powers could do anything, it would be to derail you from an understanding of your significance to God and from a relationship that he would want you to have so that you could experience his very best for your life. We have a spiritual enemy. 2 Corinthians chapter 2, verse 9 and 11 says, Paul says to the Corinthian church, I wrote to you so that Satan will not outsmart you, for we are familiar with his evil schemes. He said, I want you to be ready. We're not ignorant. We know that there's one who's called the deceiver. He's called the accuser. He's called the prince of darkness. He's called the father of all lies. And we know that he has a game plan. We know that he's, if you will, studying us. We know that he's sizing us up. We know that he's looking for opportunities where our weaknesses are on display and where our vulnerabilities could be tested, that he might somehow exploit those things to pull us away from the heart of and the will of God in our lives. So we're gonna be ready. We're gonna be ready because the devil doesn't take a day off. Second reason we're gonna be ready is you're not as strong as you think. And nor am I. You are not as strong as you think. Paul wrote to the Corinthians, he said, so if you think you are standing firm, hey, if you think you are standing solid in the character of Jesus, the plan of God for your life, the person that you want to be, if you think you're standing solid, just note, please be careful that you don't fall. We tend to be bullish on our self-control. Like we tend to overestimate what we can do in moments of temptation, and we tend to underestimate what we can do in moments of vulnerability. Studies have shown, it's very interesting, that people do overestimate their ability to resist temptation. It is called restraint bias. That's why, how many of you experience, like, you're at home and somebody sets a plate of brownies on the kitchen table, and you're like, not today, right? I got a game plan. I'm not having any of those. No, I'm not. And you circle that thing one time and you are full of restraint. You come back a second time, I am Mrs. Self-Control today. And by the third circle, you're like double fisting brownies into your mouth. You're like, what happened to me? The part of our brain that controls willpower, it wears down. That's why good-willed people, which you are, we know who we want to be, and we fight, and we fight, and we fight, and we fight, and then we have a moment of weakness, and we do what we didn't want to do. We say what we didn't want to say. We react like we didn't want to react. But for a lot of it, we have staying power. Our willpower wears down. That's why, how many of you work with some crazy people at work? Like they are crazy, all caps, okay? Yeah, a lot of you got crazies. And the interesting thing is this, is that you can usually get through a whole 8 to 5 without killing anybody. With your words, with your fists. You can get through a full day like restraining yourself, controlling yourself, doing what's right, even if they are crazy. And then you get home and you yell at your kids. You get home and you just kind of lose it with your spouse. Why is that? It's because willpower wears down. So that's why we're going to pre-decide, especially in areas that could be a unique temptation to us. We're going to pre-decide that we are ready. What do we know? We know we have an enemy that is coming for us, and we know the reality is we are not as strong as we think we are at certain times. So with God's help today, we're going to be ready. What I want to do with you today is I want to share 3 thoughts. I want to share 3 keys to fighting temptation. We're going to pre-decide, number 1, to move the line. We're going to pre-decide, number 2, to magnify the cost. And we're going to pre-decide, number 3, that we have an escape route. We're going to plan our escape. Let's talk about this first concept. Number 1, we're going to pre-decide to move the line. So let me illustrate this by giving you a line here. So here's a line, and here's what I've noticed about lines in our life. This line over here is going out of bounds for the purpose of God for your life, for his will and intent. Over on this side would be called possible things that could destroy you. Over here is sinful things. Over here is the wrong thing to do. Over here is the right thing to do. Over here is the will of God. Over here is the good things that you should be and I should be pursuing with our life. But how many of you have noticed on some issues in life, we want to get right to the line? Anybody with me? Like there's other areas like, oh, I would never do that. There's no way I'd go over there. But there's some areas we just try to get right here. Right here. Polish our little halo and stand right here on the line. Like, for instance, I'm a junior in high school. And I didn't grow up Christian, but I've come to faith in Jesus in high school. And I don't know all the rules, but I'm starting to read the Bible. And again, if you're new to faith, it's not really about rules. I mean, there's an ethic to be lived out. There's obedience. But it all comes out of this love relationship that we have with God. Just like in any relationship that you have that's significant, you want to live a certain way around them to do the best you can for them. And out of this love relationship with God who rescues us and redeems us and brings us into his family, and now we start living that out. But this line right here, so I'm a junior in high school, and I'm starting to read the Bible, and I'm learning that God has some thoughts about my sexuality. That God created sex as a gift. It's not a mistake. It's an amazing thing. He created it on purpose and for a purpose, but there's a context for it. So I'm asking my friend Jeremy as a junior, like, so what can I do? I didn't have a lot of Christian friends. So what can I do? Is there anything I shouldn't do? How close can I? What can I do with my hands? Like, can you get, right? I'm asking him questions about how close to this line can I get without disappointing the heart of God? But what's interesting is there's a lot of things that we know are dangerous and we don't want to be near the line. Like, for instance, how many of you've gone on a whitewater rafting trip? Yeah. When I was in college, I mean, I was just a savage. How many think you're invincible when you're in college? That's why you're invincible. So I would like class 4, like bring it on, you know, just as much adventure, like let's get right to this line. Let's do danger without dying. But then how many know you get married and you have kids, you're like, let's look at the class 3 options they have here. Right, and then they're little kids, like they're kindergarten, first, second, like, is there such a thing as a class 2? And then you have a newborn, it's like, let's do a bath with bubbles. And you just keep moving further from the line of danger. Or how about this? Like, let's say you were flying. I asked this first service, has anybody not flown in a plane before? Because we can solve that. We can, right? Okay. Sometime in the next few years, parents, you got to make this dream happen for these kids. Do you want to go on a flight sometime? Maybe? All right. Okay, all right. Just curious. We'll talk after service. Okay, so anyway, Disneyland might be coming your way. Anyway, let's say you get on a flight and you're flying from Spokane to Los Angeles. And you know, like when you fly, like how many know when you fly, like, let's not flirt with danger. Let's just do the right thing, Mr. Police officer, Mr. Pilot, Mrs. Pilot. Pilot comes on there and comes, everyone, welcome aboard. So glad to have you on flight 429 to Los Angeles. Hey, we were talking up here, and before we take off, we've decided to do this. Normally we load the plane with 10,000 gallons of fuel, but I've never made it there in 8,000 gallons, and I'd like to give it a shot today. What? What? You want to travel with what? How many? No. You put the full fuel in the thing. You get in the air. Oh, this is your captain again. You're going to notice on your left, it is Mount Whitney. And recently, my co-pilot and I, we saw Top Gun 2. And I have always wanted to do that maneuver. So brace yourself, because we're going to pull up and try not to take off our landing gear. You're like, what? What are we doing? What are we doing? No, let's not do that. Everyone, buckle up. We're just about to land the plane. But you know what I'm thinking? I've landed so many planes on runways. I'd really like to give I-5 a try. So hang on. We're doing what? Why are we doing this? No. Many things, when we know there's danger, what do? We want to be here. So here's the point. When there's areas that you're tempted in, you name it. I mean, you know you. You know when you can do things that are outside the will of God. You know when you can do some things that could be destructive to you, or you know you. I know me. When I know where the danger is, that I have a hard time not stepping across, here's what I'm gonna do. Point number one, I'm gonna move the line. I'm gonna move the line. Like, that's where I know I'm gonna get in trouble, but here's where I know, like, I probably got it in me. Like there's where sometimes my self-control, it just wanes and I hurtle over the top. I'm gonna move the line. I'm gonna step back from the danger. I'm gonna make some decisions about what I do with my life, where I take my life, and where that line is established that keeps me. It's a buffer. So let me give you some real life examples. Let's say that you are tempted to look at inappropriate images. We live in a culture that's just saturated with pornography, and it is challenging. And there are many good-willed people, some of us in this room, that have struggled with that or presently are. But let's say that you find out that usually when you step across the line, it's after 8 p.m. It's when things get dark. It's when the house settles down. And so you pre-decide, I'm setting restrictions on all my electronics. Every device that seems to hinder me, we're having a new line. At 6:30 p.m., those things are no longer accessible to me. What did I do? I know I'm tempted in this, so I've reestablished the line. Let's say that, how many of you love to shop through Amazon? Oh, come on. How many of you love to shop through Amazon? You could have new spandex by 4 p.m. this afternoon if you just get on that thing and push that. But it's amazing. I mean, it's just crazy. I mean, I wave at a UPS, FedEx, post office. Used to be post office. Now you're driving a 1936 something to my house. Every single day we have packages coming. But let's say this, hypothetical. Let's say that you know you're an impulse buyer. And you know, a lot of times, like, you buy stuff that you don't need. And then you feel the tension of that. Sometimes you feel the guilt of that. Sometimes you feel the financial pain of that. Sometimes you feel the crunch between your spouse, and it leads to arguments. And it's, you know that sometimes you just go over. So you decide, I am moving the line. From now on, I'm going hardcore. If I'm gonna purchase something on Amazon, I am giving my purchase code to my BFF or to my spouse. They have to authorize my purchase before I make a purchase. Why? Because I'm moving the line so that I don't do something impulsive that's gonna take me out in that direction. Or how about this one? Let's say that you are a high school student and you don't normally vape, but you've noticed that there's certain friends that when you're in certain environments with them, you're tempted. It's not really who you want to be, although you're wrestling, but when you're around them, you just fold. And the person that you want to be or become just gets pretty confusing in that exciting moment to get high or to do something adventurous or to feel part of the group. And so what you've noticed is there's certain people, there's certain places, I'm moving the line. There's two friends in particular, when I spend the night at their house, that's always what they want to do. And I find that sometimes I can withhold and sometimes I don't. But if I want to establish a new character for who I'm becoming, I'm gonna move the line. Are you with me so far? We're gonna move the line. We're gonna create barriers between us and sin. Now listen, I might have seen it like this before I was a follower of Jesus. Like, man, that's a restrictive life. Boring. I'll tell you, when you walk in the will and purpose of God, I promise you, you will find that it's the most freeing life. You will find that it's a life full of peace. That the adventures that whatever you're seeking after, that it gives you, that there are other things with God that will do just that and more. In fact, I love what Psalm 16, verse 6 says. The psalmist writes, the boundary lines have fallen for me in pleasant places. surely I have a delightful inheritance. Let me share one final story on this. So I want to talk to our teenagers a bit today. You've really been my heart this week. One thing that I'm proud of, and I don't say this to in any way brag, or my life's not perfect. I haven't made all the right decisions. I've done things I wish I wouldn't have done. I've said things I wish I wouldn't have said. But one decision that I am proud of today that I wasn't always proud of in the yesterdays is that I've never been drunk before in my life. And when I was 14, almost 15, I became a believer in Jesus Christ. I made a decision to trust in him for the gift of salvation. And my life slowly began to change. Some people get shot out of a cannon. I kind of dribbled out of it, but I began to change. And at that point in my life, like I was really committed to certain ethical things, but I can't say that faith was driving all those decisions. In fact, what I would tell you about when I was a teenager was sports was driving some of those decisions. So, I was an all-state football player, 4-year varsity baseball player. I was a state champion wrestler. I went on to wrestle in college, and I'm not trying to toot my own horn. It's just that was my world. And so when it came to like, hey, you want to do hardcore drugs? You want to go do some meth with me, Bart? It wasn't like Jesus says no to meth. It was like, no, I'm chasing something right now. But how many of you know that the goals of your teenage years don't always last into your 20s? And if that is the restraint, if I won't go past this threshold because I'm chasing a state title, I want to make a varsity lineup, I want to whatever, well, as soon as those things are no longer there, this thing just opens right up. And now it's like, well, why don't you step to this line? And that's what's so powerful about God is he becomes this internal drive for us to make decisions on a whole different level. So here's the story. I get through high school. I've never drank. I get to college. I'm going to Central Washington University. And let me just tell you, I'm living in a dorm. I'm wrestling on the team. And a bunch of my friends, I have all different types of friends, but especially the wrestling team, just party animals. I mean, it's a normal public school. Kids aren't doing everything that they could do, but man, the weekends were pretty intense. And so I'm going to parties. I'm going with my friends. I'm usually that one weirdo, the square, that's not drinking. I have a little bit of tension about that because like I want to belong, but I'm also trying to live out certain values. And I'm somewhat alone, not totally alone, but somewhat alone in living out those values. And I'm curious because, listen, people wouldn't party if it wasn't fun. How was the party? Oh, it was miserable. So lonely, so boring. No, they're usually having fun. I go to these parties, and sometimes I'd see my friends drink way too much and just get smashed. Sometimes I'd find out that they slept with somebody. Sometimes they slept with somebodies. I mean, just stuff happens sometimes at these things. And I'm kind of curious, like not to do those things, but I'm kind of curious to do at least like one step over the line. Like, let me beer bong one time over the line, right? And so I have this friend named Jeff. He goes to college with me. And he's just, he's lighting it up on the weekends. And I'm following the Lord, and I'm trying to make a difference in his life, for the Lord. And he's making a difference in my life as a friend. We're taking History 101, and Jeff, him and I, we were just weird. We had this relationship where we would bet all the time about just really just crazy things. Like we'd be walking to class in the morning, it'd be raining, there'd be a mud puddle, and I'd say, Jeff, I'll give you $10 right now if you roll in that mud puddle. Okay, and he just would roll in the mud puddle. I'd be like, dang it, 2 hours of work, $5 an hour. One time we almost got in a fist fight over a bet. You guys remember Pizza Pipeline? Well, back in the 90s, they had a pizza called, I think it was called the Goliath. And this thing was like a heart attack waiting to happen. I mean, it was like 4 pounds of pizza. It was ginormous. In fact, I remember buddies of mine, we bought this pizza, and I remember we were laughing so hard because we couldn't fit it in the door without turning the box sideways. It's like, this thing is huge. And I said, Jeff, what would I have to pay you to eat the whole pizza? He's like, $50. I was like, done. And when we shook hands, it was like, done. Like, you will die before you break this promise, right? So it was like, done. So we bet that. And Jeff gets like a third of the way, and he's burping. He's not looking good. I mean, it's already like an ungodly amount of pizza that he's consumed. And then what I didn't expect was he ran to the bathroom. I heard, he made himself puke. And I was like, technical violation. There's no making yourself puke. You have to eat the whole thing. You didn't say I couldn't make myself puke. There's no way I can eat this thing without puking. And all of a sudden, he got so hot at me, it almost turned into a fist fight. Well, this is that Jeff. Okay, so it's our freshman year, first semester, and we're in 8 o'clock History 101 class. And I mean, I did well in high school, but I didn't study like is somewhat demanded of you in college. So Jeff and I, we've been up all day. We studied like 8 hours for this final exam in this class. We had to read a book that was 250 pages, and there would be one question on the final exam from the book, and that would be 30% of your grade. So we've read the book, and we're studying all the notes and this, and it's 12 o'clock, a little past 12, and I am so tired. And the finals at 8 a.m. the next morning. And I'm like, I just said this hypothetically. I was like, Jeff, could you imagine if you had to read this book again right now? He's like, what would you pay me? And I was like, what? He's like, yeah, what would you pay me? And I was like, I'll give you $50. There's no way you can read this book right now. Like, I can barely stay awake. He's like, no, I don't want that bet. I want a different bet. I was like, all right, name the bet. He's like, if I finish this book, you have to get hammered with me this Friday. And I was like, I'm not taking that bet. No, I will take that bet. If you can't read the book, I was a part of a college ministry called SALT that met every Thursday night. In fact, some of you were here when Drake over the summer came and shared. That was my college pastor. So tell you what, if you can't read the book, you have to come with me to SALT 8 weeks in a row. Now, how many of you know, like, I know God is on my side in this bet? If there is a God in heaven, he is going down in the flames on this bet, right? Like, get wasted or go to church. Come on, God, help a brother out, right? So we make this bet, and he calls me at 4:30 in the morning, and I am just so out of it. And he's na 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 na. What? Na 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 na. I'm like, what, Jeff? He's like, I just read the book. I'm like, no, you didn't. He's like, I promise. No, you didn't. I swear on my mother's grave, he tells me. No, you didn't. I think he pinky promised. It got real. And he did it. He read the whole book, and I had shook his hand. And now I'm struggling, like, oh, man, it's Monday. I'm like, dang it. Gosh, why did I do that? It's Tuesday, like, oh, it's Wednesday. Well, and I really felt like at the time, like, I need to honor my word. Like, I gave the dude my word, but I was also interested. I gave my word, but I also wanted to know what was over here. I called my brother on Thursday, my twin brother, Ben, best friend. I said, hey, you guys remember those days at all in the 90s? You had like a calling card, 10 cents a minute. Remember those? It's like, hey, I only got 2 minutes on my card. No, it's like, hey, I made a mistake. He's like, well, what'd you do? I was like, man, I told him the story. I bet Jeff and I lost. And he goes, Bart, you are an idiot. I was like, I know. He's like, no, you don't know. You are seriously gonna fold your character, this commitment that you've had for a couple of years, you're gonna fold it on a bet? You do whatever you gotta do to get out of this bet and make it right with Jeff. And my brother's a pretty lax dude, but he spoke some words into my life. He spoke some life into my life. And I went back to Jeff and I said, Jeff, whatever I gotta do. I can't remember, I had to pay him 50 or $100. Whatever, Jeff was disappointed, whatever you gotta do. But what I'd say is this, I didn't know it at the moment at 18 and a half years old, but that reestablished a new line. That moment where I was just about to head in this direction, it pulled me back to this direction. Now listen, if you drink in moderation, I'm not judging you. If you celebrate something, you have a glass of wine, you have a beer, I'm not judging you. The Bible has things to say about it. Do not be filled with wine, drunk, which leads to debauchery, doing some stupid. Instead, be filled with God's Spirit, right? You need to think about, am I a stumbling block to other people? Am I in control of this? Is it in control of me? What does it do with my witness if I am a follower of Jesus? Those are all questions. But what I'm saying is, for me, it reestablished a new line. And I had no idea that at 18, at 45, this line would still be. In fact, you guys get all the extra bonus material that the first service didn't get because we go long. But just when I was on sabbatical, I went to the Catholic service. They gave me an opportunity to speak impromptu, and I spoke. And at the end of the service, somebody comes up to me and says, would you do my wedding? I was like, wow, okay, so I did their wedding just like a month ago. And they're 70 years old. And at that wedding, they had champagne and they were doing a toast. And it was kind of the small thing, and they gave me a little glass, and we did a toast, and I had a sip of it. And I didn't think much of it, but I went home and I said, hey, honey, just so you know, they had this toast, and I had a sip of champagne. Do you remember your reaction there, babe? You did what? You drank without me? In a setting like that, she knows details. We have not drank any alcohol for 9 years. The last time that we had a sip of alcohol was when we were doing the adoption thing, and they had a celebration thing, and we wanted to honor those people with what they gave us, and we had a sip. I just had a sip. I swear it was less than an ounce. girl be holding my rope nice and tight back here, okay? All right, what are we gonna do? I gotta get back to my notes here. Okay, we are talking today about pre-deciding, and the first decision we're gonna make is we're gonna move the line. I don't know the application of that, but I know God will help you with that. Where are you tempted? Where do you need to move it, and what does that mean? Let's make that happen in our lives today. Okay, let me give you a part two if I can find where I am in my notes pages. Okay, oh, here we go. All right, pre-decide, number one, to move the line. Number two, if you have notes page, we're gonna magnify the cost. We're gonna pre-decide, we're gonna magnify the cost. What I mean by that is whenever we give into temptation, whenever we flirt with this line, there is a risk. And sometimes that risk is way more exponentially impacting negatively than we could ever imagine. And so I want you to think about the cost. Here's the question we're gonna ask. What if the worst case scenario comes true when I hop the fence and I head over on that side? Could I be a 17-year-old dad when I never had that in the plans? Could I financially make a decision that would impact my family for years to come in a negative way? Could I lose my job? Could I lose my credibility? Could I lose my eligibility? Could I lose the respect that my spouse has for me? Could I lose the respect that my kids have for me? We're gonna magnify the cost. What if Numbers 32 verse 23 came true? I love what it says. It says, Moses says, you will be sinning against the Lord, and you may be sure that your sin will find you out. That's a mom's verse right there, right there. And you may be sure that your sin will find you out. But what if you hop the fence thinking, I'll never get caught. No one will ever know. It's not that big of a deal anyways. Everybody else is doing it. But what if it finds you out and you have to deal with consequences that you just never really wanted to face? Several years ago, there was somebody in this church, and this individual was a president of a corporation, and if I said it, 100% of you would know this corporation, doing very well in his career. And he calls me up, and I can tell like he is panicked. He is scared. This president is in a very weak moment in his life. And he goes on to tell me that allegations, which were factually true, had come forward that he had sexually coerced several women in the workplace. They did give consent, but there was coercion, and now there was a massive investigation going on with his life. He, in a place of power, if you will, leveraged that power to do things that he shouldn't have done. He being a married man with children at the time. And let me tell you, this destroyed this man's life. He lost his job. He lost his career. In fact, Heather and I hired him a year later to come detail our car just because they were so financially challenged. They moved from this community, which they loved, to get away from the scrutiny of the situation and try to relaunch what was, if you can imagine, a very conflicting and failing marriage at the moment because of these things. We're going to magnify the cost. By the grace of God, I think I can say with full integrity that I've never flirted with another woman in the 16 years that I've been married to Heather. But sometimes I try to magnify the cost. What would it mean if I was not faithful to my wife? Here's what I know. I know that I would crush this woman's heart. I know just on the makeup of who God has made Heather to be that it would be very difficult to come back to a trusting relationship with me. I know this. My sons don't think I wear a cape anymore, but I do believe that they respect the fact that my faith is real, is genuine, and I want to live for God. I know that I would lose the respect of my sons, my daughter, and when this one could understand fully, he'd have challenges as well. Here's what else I know. I know that God has entrusted to me, alongside other people, to serve you and to shepherd this church and to care for the body of Christ who assembles in this faith gathering, these faith gatherings. And I know that I would lose the credibility. I'd lose credibility with lots of you. And there would be some of you that the pain of that situation would actually, you wouldn't re-engage in church. Just statistically, that's what happens. People get jaded, they get disillusioned, they say, what a hypocrite. all this, and this, and no follow through. Isn't it amazing that 5 minutes of sin can wreck years of serving Jesus faithfully? Isn't it crazy that 5 minutes of foolishness can ruin your reputation for years to come? So we're gonna pre-decide. I'm ready. I'm gonna move the line where I need to move the line, and I'm gonna magnify the cost. I'm gonna think what could happen, and if it's not the results or the outcomes I want, I am going to magnify the cost and make a change. And then finally, number third today is we're gonna plan our escape. We're gonna move the line, we're gonna magnify the cost, we're gonna plan our escape. The story that I love in the Bible that highlights this, maybe better than any other story, is the story of Joseph. And if you know the story of Joseph, it's out of Genesis 39, and we get a little description of what he looked like. Genesis 39, verse 6 and 7, Joseph was a very handsome man and well-built, young man. And Potiphar's wife soon began to look at him lustfully. Come and sleep with me, she demanded. Potiphar at that time was the ruler over Egypt, and this is the boss's wife. Joseph is serving as a servant in that empire, and this is the boss's wife who is hot and heavy coming on to him. And I just wonder, because he's a man, he's a human, he's a person, I just wonder if there's any temptation to that. Like, hey, thank you for those compliments. I am young, I am strong, I am single, and you coming on to me, I'm not coming on to you, and who's gonna find out anyway? You just wonder, was there a temptation there? Or you wonder this, like, couldn't he have had the attitude like, well, you know what, God, I'm not so happy with you right now anyways. Like, why am I living according to your program when it doesn't seem like you're doing anything for my program? Like, where were you when my brothers abandoned me and left me in the pit? Where were you, God, when the slave traders came by and they shackled me up and they carried me to a place I'd never been before, away from my homeland, away from my father, away from my family? Where were you at, God? But can I tell you that Joseph had a different faith? Joseph, he didn't make permanent decisions based on temporary problems. Joseph predetermined in his heart that he would honor God with his life. So when she came onto him, he resisted faithfully. But can I tell you this? It didn't happen once. It didn't happen twice. The language in Genesis 39 is plural. Like, she kept pressing her A game. Hey, my Hebrew man, how you doing? Looking lonely over there. What's a sweet little thing like you doing in a place like this, right? She kept coming on to Joseph. Day after day, she's hitting on him. Day after day, he's like, God, give me the strength to resist and do what's right in your sight. Until one day, they're all alone. And she corners him again. And it's like a Netflix movie. Hey. And all of a sudden, she grabs a hold of him, and she's like, you will have sex with me. And what does he do? He had a plan. He flees. He escapes. He's like, do whatever. He bolts, and his robe literally comes off of him, his outer cloak, and it's left in her hands. And then, of course, there's this whole allegation thing that starts. But the point at this part is Joseph was ready. Joseph had pre-decided who he was, what his ethic was on this issue, and what he would do. He had planned his escape. He had thought, she grabs, I'll tell you what I'm doing, I'm running. She tries to pin me down, I'm escaping. She tries to call me into her room, I'm running out of the palace. She grabs, I run. I don't know if I'm strong enough to resist this temptation, so I have a plan to flee this temptation. Scripture says it's exactly what he does, Genesis 39:12. But he left his cloak in her hand and ran out of the house. What did he do? He had predetermined that when I am tempted, I'm gonna get out of temptation's way. Friends, can I tell you that is wisdom at work right there? And here's what I love about God's word that applies to all of us today. You may be under some barrage of temptation. There may be a conflict in your soul. Your spirit may be willing, but your flesh may be weak. But the good news, according to 1 Corinthians 10:13, is this. It says, and God is faithful, and he will not let you be tempted beyond what you can bear. But when you are tempted, he will also provide a way out. He will provide a route of escape so that you can endure it. Listen, there's no sexual temptation today. There's no financial temptation today. There is no substance abuse temptation today where God says, oh, your only option today is to sin. It's your only option. No. That's not the God we serve. We may feel tempted, but Jesus, he says, come alongside me. He says, put your hand in mine. Put your weakness in my strength. And it says that he will provide a way out so that we can endure. As these temptations come, we can endure. And in his grace, through his strength, we can win. So today, we're going to be ready. We're going to pre-decide to move the line. We're going to pre-decide to magnify the cost. And we're going to pre-decide to plan our escape. Because here's what I know. No one plans to mess up their life. But sadly, it happens all the time. So here's the last question and one final story before I close. The question is this. Why would you resist a temptation in the future if you had the power to eliminate it today? Why would you resist a temptation you face down the road in the moment if you had the ability to make a decision today? I'm gonna invite Morgan forward, and here's what I wanna do. I wanna close with one final story. When I was in college, and again, just trying to figure out the way of Jesus and what that meant for my life, and certainly wasn't living for him in every area of my life, but trying to figure it out as a growing disciple of his. And my sophomore year, I was 19 years old. I felt compelled to write a letter to my future wife. As it turns out, I didn't know who that was or when she would read it, and Heather wouldn't read it for 9 years. But I want to just share a few of the thoughts that I wrote down in this letter. I wrote to my wife, I'm a month away from turning 20, and I wanted to write you, my future wife, a letter. I go on to tell her how awesome she's gonna be, right? And I say, I made a commitment to you today that you're the woman I wanna spend the rest of my life with. So I give myself fully to you. And I promise to love, to serve, to honor, to respect, and to protect you till the day that I die. And I wrote, I'm proud to say that I have kept a promise that I made with God and myself a few years ago. I have saved myself for you, my wife, because you have been completely worth the wait. I don't credit myself with the ability to wait until marriage because I'm about to burst with sexual energy right now. Anybody remember 19? Hot, sweaty mess, okay. No, it's been God who has supplied me with the strength to wait for you. And now the wait is over. So prepare for 2 minutes of everything I have. I know it was an exaggeration, but just bear with it. So as a young man, looking out my dorm window at CWU on a hot spring night, I say to you, my wife, I love you. And I hope I can bring you as much joy as you bring me. Committed to you forever, Bart. Here's what I know. The devil is going to attack. He doesn't take a day off. Here's what I also know. You're not as strong as you think, and nor am I. So today we're going to pre-decide to move the line. We're going to magnify what would the cost really be, and we're going to plan our escape. So that when we're tired, or we're overwhelmed, or we're angry, or we're disappointed, or we're depressed, we're more vulnerable, we'll have pre-decided that our decisions won't be based on the emotions at hand. They'll be based on our values, because when our values are clear, our decisions will be easier.